Welcome to the Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we strive to keep our doors open to anyone who wants to join us, virtually or soon in person. My name is Sally Watts, and it's my pleasure to be your service leader today. We start our program by offering our acknowledgement that we stand today on the traditional land of the very first people of Florence, the Saisla Indians. We honor with gratitude the land itself and members of the Saisla tribe, past, present, and future. Let's continue our service with our opening song, Spirit of Life. I'm joined here by a few of our folks, and we're going to have Jeff Lovejoy pre-record this song. We're going to sing together, Spirit of Life. So tonight we have a Zoom gathering. It'll be hosted by our own Ray Plummery. Yay for Ray! And we invite our guest speaker, Reverend Reynolds, who's with us today, to join us as we talk amongst ourselves and continue to share our stories. Next week, June 6th, we are delighted to have Reverend Elizabeth Mount back with us as she introduces us to our June theme of play. P-L-A-Y, play, yay! And there's a reminder that we have an annual business meeting, also on June 6th at noon. The meeting will be via Zoom, and Zoom invitations will go out in our May 26th and June 2nd, went out on the May 26th, and will go out on the June 2nd e-blast. All are welcome to join us. Are there any other announcements from anybody here? Okay. So I am going to invite Reverend Reynolds to come forward, as also Brooke, as Brooke will light our flame, and Reverend Dennis and I have something we'd like to share in responsive reading for this. So Brooke, if you'll light the flame.
Our chalice lighting words are from Brian Kilty. In times of darkness, we stumbled towards the tiny flame.
In times of cold, we seek the warming fire.
In times of repression, we reach for the lamp of truth.
In times of loss, we pray for the comforting light.
In times of joy, we light a candle of celebration.
Spirit of life, as we kindle this light, help us find what we need this day. Blessed be. Thank you. Catherine, will you come forward? We've got some joys and concerns.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is the time of our service where we remind ourselves how we are connected. We just remind ourselves because we always are connected. It's just how we live. Spirit lives through us. As we open up slowly and safely from our pandemic isolation, we may need to practice on how to be out in the world, or practice interacting in person with each other. If you feel fearful, perhaps start with making a list of activities or people that sound delightful to you. Activities that make you smile. Then pick one or two. It's like any practice. Meditation, playing an instrument, writing, art, exercise. Life is a creative practice. And if you know anyone struggling to re-enter, Reach out in compassion. This pandemic has changed even the strongest extroverts among us, as well as the most sensitive and everyone in between. May our hearts always remain open and in cooperation with our highest visions of ourselves and the world. And so it is, and please drop several shells in there for all of us. Thank you, Sally.
How about one more?
Okay,
Okay.
thank
One to
you.
grow on. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Love those joys and concerns. I don't think I have any to share this morning, so I'm going to just let that be. I invite Reverend Dennis to come back up. We have a responsive reading. It's titled A Litany of Remembrance by Roland Gittleson?
Gittleson.
Gittleson.
Gittleson was a military chaplain, and he wrote this litany for the dedication of the Iwo Jima Memorial.
Thank you.
In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them.
So long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
Blessed be. I've selected a wonderful, no, I haven't, actually Reverend Dennis did. This is a wonderful rendition of a song from our hymnal. It's called I Know This Rose Will Open. I know you're going to enjoy this performance, so sit back and enjoy as we remember them. Thank you.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, 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 I know. I know, 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 know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear, I know my soul, I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear, I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear, I know my soul, I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear, I know my fear, I know my soul will unfurl my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear will burn away, I know my soul will unfurl its wings, will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know this rose, I know this rose, I know my fear will burn away, I know my soul will unfurl its wings, will unfurl its wings.
Again, that was a beautiful, beautiful song, wasn't it? Love that song. It's my pleasure to welcome back to our pulpit Reverend Dennis Reynolds, who traveled from Eugene to be with us today. His message is very timely, for our May theme is stories. Tomorrow is Memorial Day, and I welcome Reverend Dennis to our pulpit.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you all for the opportunity to be with you this morning as I share stories of remembrance. My father was a veteran. He fought in World War II, serving in uniform from 1941 to 45. He died as part of what has been called the last casualties of World War II. His cause of death was asbestos mesothelioma, the cancer that resulted from the asbestos fiber in his lung from his work in the shipyards in 1940 and 41, building ships to send supplies to the Allies in Europe. He had many stories to tell about his active duty service, which included time in England, landing in Normandy on the coast of France a week after D-Day, and being part of the continuing battle that raged across Europe. He told me about a close call he had during the Battle of the Bulge, and he talked about how when his, as he described it, artillery unit had burned out their guns, they became part of the occupation forces in captured German territory. He was part of the forces that liberated Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. This was a story he did not share for decades. It seems some stories we choose to try to not remember. Further discussions of my father's wartime experiences that he shared with me are stories for another day. When the war started, my mom was a young stay-at-home mom with a new baby, but in time she too became part of the war effort, going to work at the Boeing plant in Renton, Washington, where she worked as a riveter. Yes, my mom was Rosie the Riveter. But that too is a story for another day. My sister Linda was born when my dad was in training. He got leave to come home to see the new baby before he shipped out. He was then gone for 4 long years, leaving my mom for a time as a single parent, and my sister not really knowing who her daddy was, beyond being a photo on the wall and the one who wrote that occasional letter. She has told of her excitement on the day he was scheduled to come home. It seems, though, that her new dress became soiled and she had to wear a hand-me-down to meet Daddy. But all of that, too, is a story for another day. The dress, you see, was borrowed from her Aunt Fran, who was just a few weeks older than Linda. It seems that my mother and her mother were pregnant at the same time, Mom with her first and Grandma with her 5th daughter. The tales of Linda and Fran growing up just weeks, yet a generation apart, are stories for another day. Today, I want to talk about Memorial Day. Memorial Day, celebrated on the last Monday in May, was only designated a federal holiday in 1971, yet it has long been a day dedicated to honoring those who died in service to their country and all veterans who served. It was initially known as Decoration Day, thus named for the practice of decorating graves of veterans to honor the departed heroes. Memorial Day came into being at the end of the Civil War, that horrible, uncivil conflict. It's amazing to look at how horrific that war really was. The numbers give us a picture of the horror. Estimates of the total deaths range between 630 and nearly 800,000 deaths, with 2/3 of those coming from wounds that were infected and from disease. Nearly 2/3 of the deaths were Southerners, and since most of the fighting took place in the South, the cities and farmlands of that region were also devastated. To put the numbers in context, the death toll was about 2.5% of the then U.S. population. Such a percentage today would be nearly 7 million deaths. There was so very much to mourn. And a significant change to celebrate: the end of slavery. At the war's beginning in 1860, some 4 million people were considered the property of another person. Most of them were freed by that war, yet some 1 million of those newly freed men, women, and children died of disease during the war and in the years that followed. It seems that the horrors of war were followed by the scourges of starvation and disease. The war has led to what has been described as the greatest American biological crisis of the 19th century, that in many, amongst other things, included a smallpox epidemic. The very first Memorial Day is said to have been celebrated by a group of newly freed black slaves who dug up the bodies of Union soldiers from a mass grave in Charleston, North Carolina, outside of a Confederate prison camp. With the help of some white clergy, they reinterred 250 soldiers, blessed their remains, decorated their grave, and honored their sacrifice. 3 years later, in 1861, the commander of the U.S. Army declared that May 30th would be Decoration Day to honor the following. That year, President Grant participated in the first memorial ceremony held at Arlington National Cemetery. In the years that have followed, Memorial Day has become a time to honor veterans and all who have died. It's a time when many decorate the graves of lost loved ones. Today, as we honor the nearly 600,000 Americans who have died from COVID, let us also take time to honor and to remember those who died as a result of that terrible 19th century American Civil War, and pledge anew to continue to seek ways to reduce destructive divisiveness as we continue to strive for freedom and dignity for all. Tomorrow, on Memorial Day, I urge you to take some time to remember. Remember the truths of history, and remember the pain of loss that most of us have endured in our lifetimes. Take time to remember. When I take time to remember, to reconnect with my past, I remember the childhood Memorial Days of my childhood. In particular, I remember how I spent Saturday each year before the holiday. My father was active in the Salem, Oregon American Legion post, and as such was part of the team of veterans who each year decorated the graves of veterans in graveyards all over the city. My brother and I were drafted to be part of the team that placed flags on the graves in Salem's largest cemetery. We gathered at a graveyard parking lot where one of the Legionnaires had his trunk full of boxes full of flags, and several other American Legion members would also join us. They made a point every time of thanking my brother and I for being there, not knowing we really didn't have a choice. Each of us would take up handfuls of flags to distribute individually throughout the graveyard. A small cast iron holder for the flags identified each grave that contained the remains of a veteran. Most were in the shape of a cross. A few had a Star of David. I didn't see a single grave with a crescent moon for Islam, nor did I see any chalices on those graves. My brother and I were instructed not to run, but to maintain a good pace as we distributed the flags. It was a large cemetery, and there were lots of veterans buried there. The legionnaires and we too strode purposely amongst the headstones. Sometimes I would see one of the veterans stop before an individual grave as they read its inscription. Sometimes they would bow head, and on occasion they would take a knee in solemn tribute and remembrance. I wondered why that grave. Perhaps it was a shared first name or the significance of a birthday, or for someone who may have spent a lifetime in Salem, it might have been the grave from someone who had been a childhood or high school friend. I do not know. I do know that years later, when I first visited the Vietnam War Memorial, the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C., and took that walk downward below the ground and began to read some of the many names engraved there, I stopped when I saw the name of a soldier with whom I shared a birth date. It was the same as mine. And I took a knee. I honored an individual who had become one of the many. As noted, Memorial Day has changed. While the attention paid to veterans is still an important part of the day, it has increasingly become a to honor all who we have lost. While for some it's just another 3-day weekend, and I don't need to remind you, those of you who live on the coast, the beginning of the busy summer tourist season, for many it still remains a time for silent remembering. A time for visiting and decorating with flowers and flags graveyards, and a time for the sharing of the stories of those who have given their all, of those we have lost. This year in particular, we have so much to mourn. Our awareness of death has been heightened. We have all, over the past 15 minutes, walked in the shadow of death. So many have died. The death toll is now approaching 600,000 Americans, while nearly 3.5 million people have died globally. Memorial Day, though, is about so much more than numbers. It's about individuals, each with a story. Every Friday, my wife and I get a bit teary-eyed when we watch PBS's segment of the Friday news called In Memoriam, wherein they tell the stories and share photos of just a few who have died to this and succumbed to the disease that week. We have all lost so very much. Each of those who did not lose, even those of us who did not lose a family member or friend, have lived with anxiety about how the disease might come close to home. We lost our sense of confident well-being. Businesses were devastated, jobs were lost, our calm was shattered again and again, both by the disease and by the fear-fueled discord it helped create. The anxiety of the pandemic has increased the climate of distrust. Children have been advised even more than usual to keep strangers at a distance, even other children. And now, as mask wearing declines, we're left wondering whether that unmasked stranger looking over the apples at the market with our grandchild is vaccinated or not. It's a difficult time. Yet sometimes it is the darkest hour in which the light shines most brightly. As we noted in our chalice lighting, in times of darkness, we stumble toward the tiny flame. That tiny flame, a flicker of hope for different possibilities, lights our ways forward. For light always shines into the darkness, and every dark night is followed by the dawn. That deadly civil war led to the light of liberation for millions of enslaved people. The devastations of the Second World War destroyed an openly genocidal regime that executed millions. Now, the rolling out of the vaccine is described as the light at the end of the tunnel, a light that's beginning to shine on all of our faces more each day. We rightfully now embrace a feeling of increased safety as more are vaccinated and the pandemic begins to move into the past. In time, this past year with its fear and loss will move into the world of memory and be less of what we do and more of what we did. What might we choose to hold in our memories? What stories will we tell? Will we remember the quiet and solitude? Will we remember the families at home, sometimes not by choice, but nonetheless spending more time together? Will we remember special, smaller than usual holiday gatherings with a few members of our pod or bubble? Will we remember huddling around fires or propane heaters, seeking safe and warm ways to gather outdoors with friends when summer had ended? Will we remember discovering Zoom and how it offered new opportunities to see people who live far away? I have friends who tell stories of connecting with people they haven't seen since childhood. Will we remember how broadcast Sunday services were accessible to everyone? Or will we remember the fear and the tensions the pandemic helped to foster? We have traveled through the valley of the shadow of death. Will we honor the lessons that such a journey can offer? A brush with death, or just honestly acknowledging its constant presence in our lives, can offer to us an opening to a greater appreciation of life. Acknowledging the dark enhances the light. In a recent New York Times article, I read of Sister Teresa Alethea Nicole's mission to revive the practice of Memento Mori, intentionally thinking about your own death as a means of appreciating the present. Memento Mori literally means to remember your death. The concept is to intentionally think about your death every day as a means of appreciating the present and focusing on the future. It can seem radical in an era in which death, until very recently during the pandemic, has often been easy to ignore. Sister Althea says, we tend to say, my life is going to end and I have a limited amount of time. We naturally tend to think of our lives as continuing and continuing. Sister Alethea suggests any suggestion, though, that the practice is morbid. Suffering and death are facts of life. Focusing on the bright and shining, as she calls it, is superficial and inauthentic. We try to suppress the thought of death or escape it or run away from it because we think that's where we'll find happiness, she said. But it's actually in facing the darkest realities of life we find light in them. The practice of regular meditation on death has a long history. Back in the 6th century, Saint Benedict instructed his monks to keep death daily before your eyes. Such practice is not uniquely Christian. Mindful of death is a core tradition within Buddhism. The Buddha is reported to have said, live each day as though there is a bird on your shoulder asking you, is this the day? Then a day that I will die. On my 61st birthday, I gifted myself with a tattoo of a crow. It's here on my shoulder, and a place where I can see it when I look into the mirror, when I shave and brush my teeth. It's there to remind me of that teaching and to help encourage me to live each day as though it might be my last. The ancient Greek philosophers Socrates and Seneca recommended practicing death as a way to cultivate meaning and focus in your life. And the late 20th century writer Carlo Castaneda, through his teacher Don Juan, advised that we should consider death to be always looking over our shoulder. In much of human history, an awareness of death was much more part of our lives. Life expectancy was shorter. Infant and childhood deaths were higher. Just walk in an old graveyard and look at the dates on the stones. And most deaths occurred at home. In our times, especially pre-pandemic, death seemed far away. Yet for many of us, even though it's still been mostly out of sight, death in this past year has been far less out of mind. Nearly 7 years ago, I spent days on a respirator in intensive care with a very severe respiratory infection. When I came home, my recovery was a slow one. It led from weeks into months. A few weeks after I returned, I visited with my doctor. After he had confirmed that my recovery was progressing, though more slowly than I hoped, still progressing, I asked him if, given the overall state of my health, would it be okay for me to have a glass of wine to celebrate my upcoming birthday? The doctor looked at me and smiled. He said, "Friend, drink the whole bottle. Celebrate the fact that you are on this side of the grass."
Yeah. Right.
I had been that ill. Celebrate. Celebrate life. So this Memorial Day and the days to follow, remember and celebrate. Celebrate the heroes of the past and the work they have done to advance the cause of liberation for all. As you mourn the loss who were once part of your life, celebrate that they were part of your life. Celebrate the continuing unfolding of your life story with all its challenges and frustrations. Life is indeed a gift. Even in times of darkness, celebrate the light. May it be so.
Thank you, Reverend Dennis. I want to say Davis. All I can say is thank you for the reminders. As I was sitting there listening to you, I kept thinking about my family and the memories that I have and the stories that I have. But I love that you teased us at the beginning about the stories. Oh, but that's for another day. That's another day. That's another story. So you're trying to get back here, aren't you? Got it.
The preacher says amen.
Amen. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome anytime. If we've got the time, we welcome you back. Thank you. Thank you. Our offering continues this month and next for the area. It's called the Cancer Van, and it's the Friends of Florence Van Fans, aka the Cancer Van. And we have not chosen this particular community partner for some years. I think people thought that they were doing just fine, and maybe they are. But the contributions that we give and we collect and we send to them, I believe, is used just strictly for gasoline and maintenance of the van. The volunteers don't get paid. The riders don't have to pay to ride. So the money strictly goes to this worthwhile cause. So I'm asking you, if you are so inclined and you would like to contribute to our special community partner, the Cancer Van, that you send us a check. You can either mail it to us along with your contribution to this particular fellowship. We will always be grateful for that. You can mail it to us at P.O. Box 2502, Florence 97439. You can also contribute via our website. There's a donate button, and you can make a donation to both, and we'll make sure that they get that. And I know that recently we took our community partners' funds that we raised for Florence Food Share, and I believe two of you took that over to Florence Food Share, and we gave them a total sum of, I think, $1,435. So that's pretty awesome. Y'all are doing a great job. And yeah, so as we go forward with this, I ask that you repeat after me. Divine love through me.
Divine love through me.
Blesses and multiplies all that I am.
Blesses and multiplies all that I am.
All that I give.
All that I give.
And all that I receive.
And all that I receive.
I am prosperous now.
I am prosperous now.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be. So I invite Raymond to come forward. We're going to extinguish the light in our chalice as I share these words from Bruce Sourworth, titled Hungering for Meaning. In our hungering for meaning, in our aching for friendship, in our yearning for justice, in our hearts remembering of finer days, may we look deep within the mystery of things and gather our strength. May each of us proclaim as one of God's spies the graceful power of life and love, and may we live in hope. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
I invite Reverend Dennis to come back up. We have closing words, and then we will sing our peace song.
Our closing words of benediction are from Tim O'Brien. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased, when there is nothing to remember except the story. Salam, shalom, amen, and blessed be.
Two of you, will you come forward? We're going to sing our peace song. If anybody would like to join us, come on up. Well, he's going to take the pulpit. He's going to get right behind you.
Looking forward to the time when we will all be together in person
Yes.
and singing